Welcome, John Sinner, to Poznan. We're very pleased to have you at our conference today on the innovative energy utility. You are senior economist at the European Investment Bank. Could you explain us what the European Investment Bank does in the energy field? What is your role?
Okay, so the European Investment Bank is a public non-profit making institution owned by the member states with a very clear mission to promote investment. So we do infrastructure projects as opposed to normal bank. We don't really do commercial banking. We simply help finance infrastructure projects in Europe through various means and utilities. I personally am an energy economist working in the projects directorate. That means we're effectively the department which does due diligence on the project. So we look at whether a project, when it applies for financing, is technically sound, but also, and particularly, and that's my role, whether it makes financial sense, so whether there's a good chance of actually repaying the loan, which any bank likes to see, but also whether, and this is more peculiar to the European Investment Bank, whether there is an economic benefit to the project. I mean, all of our projects have to be economically beneficial, so they need to be beneficial to larger society, and that's a test we need to make.
The bank has a role in the Energy Union project. Can you explain us a little bit what the Energy Union project means and what the EIB's role is in there?
The Energy Union project is a very big project, and as we were discussing earlier in the round, there are multiple components to it. There is an infrastructure component where we as a bank are obviously, as a financier of infrastructure, called upon to contribute to financing. So the EIB doesn't finance projects by itself. There's always a multiplier effect, and there's a clear statement in the mission that we are there as an attractive source of financing to attract other financing to help realize projects. So we also ask our promoters to bring own equity into the project. We don't take equity risk, for example, we just make loans. That's one aspect. The other aspect, obviously, we're also in dialogue through our shareholders, through the member states, through our discussion with the Commission on the types of policy initiatives and developments. We try and follow that very closely in order to make sure that the environment, the investment environment, is also beneficial to the wider, as a bank in general, to the wider community, and we try and provide that aspect as well.
How can the Central and Eastern European region benefit from the EIB's assistance in fulfilling the Energy Union's goals, which are both energy security and also various innovations to help climate policy?
In principle, through the normal procedure, which is go through the member states and talk to the European Investment Bank locally, apply for funding, propose projects which are in line with what we're trying to do. We also provide a service of technical assistance for certain parts of the industry where such might reside, in a way how to structure a project to make it eligible. We tend to work above a certain size, so very small projects typically are then part of larger programs which are sublet to local banking institutions, whereas the bank tends to deal with larger projects, so we're talking about the hundreds of millions of euros rather than the tens of thousands of euros directly. So if you apply for a project, you structure it, we will then look at it, it goes through the entire process. It takes a long time, so there is the approval process, which we are part of, which takes up to half a year, 2 years, up to 2 years, depending on how long it goes, and then if the funding is successful, the money is made available.
Very good. How do you see Central and Eastern Europe as in the next years as a region for your activities? Yeah.
There are a number of challenges, particular to Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe at the moment. One is the connecting Europe and the elimination of so-called energy islands, and particularly in the energy sector. So we're talking about the Baltic states, we're talking about the Balkans, the Southeast Europe. We're talking about creating an alternative route for gas for Eastern Europe in general, which is independent from Russia. All of these has been identified as strategic level investments by the European Union as such, and usually also get prioritized in our funding, or at least their priority status gets taken into account when these projects get submitted to us for approval. So typically, if a project is a project of common interest, a so-called project of common interest, that will give it that will be taken into account during appraisal and normally helps the project, certainly in a larger scale. That's one side. On the other side, we're talking about further liberalization. We've just had long discussions about where does the market need to go, what are the specific challenges for Eastern European countries, in particular with regards also to climate policy, where Poland and neighboring countries are still much more heavily dependent, for example, on coal-fired generation than others. That in itself, the decarbonization agenda is the other big challenge as far as we're concerned in Eastern Europe, is trying to get that thinking into the general policy to implement the European policy on decarbonization and help fund projects which are actually helping to achieve the goals of lowering carbon emissions.
Thank you very much.